It's just after midnight here in what's left of Nashville. The old clock above the control board stopped 3 days ago at 11:46, but I've got a wind-up watch strapped to my wrist now, and it tells me we're about 12 minutes into Tuesday. The air in here smells like dust and warm metal, and I can hear the low, constant hum of the diesel generator in the back room. That generator is the only reason this broadcast exists. If it quits, so do I. Outside the glass, the street is quiet. Too quiet for a city this size. Even before the outbreak, I'd never heard it this silent. No cars, no planes overhead, not even the bark of a stray dog. Just a faint, irregular tapping somewhere down the block, like a loose shutter banging in the wind. For anyone still out there listening, my name's Paul Sanders. This is WZED 94.5 FM. At least, it used to be. These days, it's just me in this little concrete room, a mic, and the thin hope that someone out there is turning the dial in the dark, looking for a voice that proves they're not alone. We're on day 88 since the first confirmed infection hit the mainland. 92 days since the incident in Anchorage that most of the country didn't even notice at the time. And we're running out of time. I don't mean that as a figure of speech. I mean it literally. Subscribe for more stories and to support the production of this broadcast. When this started, we thought we had time to contain it. The CDC, the military, the governors, they all spoke with the same calm certainty, the kind you use when you want people to keep buying groceries and going to work. They told us the virus was slow-moving, that transmission required direct, obvious contact, that the infected could be quarantined in the early stages. I wanted to believe them. Hell, I think we all did. But the truth is, by the time we saw the first shaky cell phone videos of those things in the streets, people with their clothes torn and skin gray, sprinting after anything warm-blooded, it was already in every major city on the continent. We just hadn't realized it yet. I remember the exact moment I knew something was wrong. It was the second week of March. I was walking down 8th Avenue, headed to the station for my afternoon shift, when every car at the intersection of Church Street just stopped. Engines dead, horns silent. People got out, looking around like the world had glitched. And then, from somewhere way off, came this screaming. Not the kind you hear in a bar fight or an accident. This was raw, from the gut, the kind of scream you'd give if you were being torn open. It cut through traffic noise and city chatter like glass through paper. We didn't know it yet, but that was the first wave hitting downtown. By nightfall, half the city was trying to get out. The other half was trying to find someone they'd lost track of. Phone lines went first. Then the internet slowed to a crawl until it was just endless buffering wheels and dead pages. By the next morning, the local news anchor was reading headlines over a static-filled feed from her living room, a handgun sitting on the desk next to her coffee mug. That broadcast never finished. I've had time, 88 days of it, to think about how it spread so fast. I'm not a scientist, but I've been talking to anyone who still knows their way around a lab or a hospital. The working theory is that the virus, if that's even what it is, has an incubation period that's all over the place. Some people go down in hours. Others walk around for a week before it hits them. The lucky ones just get fever and confusion before they start biting. The unlucky ones stay sharp until the moment they're sprinting at you with teeth bared. I heard from Dr. Mitchell, a retired virologist who's holed up with his wife in a church basement over in East Nashville. He says whatever this thing is, it's smart. Not in a thinking way, but in a built-to-win way. It's like rabies without the waiting period, like the flu if the flu could make you tear through a locked door. He thinks it's mutating as it moves, getting faster and harder to kill. And judging by the last week, I believe him. The city's changed. Every day, more windows get boarded. More front doors are reinforced from the inside. Smoke rises from burned-out apartment blocks where people tried to clear the infected with fire. The National Guard was here for a while, setting up barricades and checkpoints. Then one morning, they were gone. Just tire tracks leading out of town and a few spent shell casings in the gutters. I don't go outside much anymore, not unless I have to. The infected zombies, if we're calling them what they are, don't just wander like in the old movies. They hunt, they follow sound, they learn. You can see it in the way they move now, the way they'll back off if they think you've got a gun, only to come at you from another angle 5 minutes later. Mitchell says that means the virus isn't just in their muscles, it's in their brains, rewriting them. If you're listening, you need to understand something. This isn't going away on its own. The government isn't coming to save you. Supply lines are broken, fuel's running low, and food, food, is becoming a luxury. I've been stretching cans of beans and stale crackers for days. I'll keep broadcasting as long as the diesel holds out, and as long as I can keep finding more. But I need to warn you. Every time I go out for supplies, I see fewer people. And the ones I do see are either too scared to talk, or they're armed and looking at me like I'm the next meal. Day 88, and the streets belong to the dead. The rest of us are just borrowing time. If you want, I can immediately continue with part 2 and just keep going until we hit your 60,000 word target without pausing. That way, the story flows like one continuous broadcast from Paul Sanders as things worsen and hope fades. I don't think you really notice how much noise the world makes until it's gone. 88 days into this, and I still catch myself straining to hear cars on the interstate, or the dull rumble of a freight train a few miles off. Now it's just the occasional groan of the station's concrete settling, or the whine of the wind sliding past the old window frames. Sometimes, late at night, I swear I can hear the city breathing out there. Not like people breathing. It's slower, heavier, almost like the sound of an animal sleeping somewhere in the dark. I sleep in the studio now, right on the floor under the desk. I've got a foam pad, a blanket, and the .38 my dad kept in his sock drawer for 40 years. The cot in the back room felt too far from the microphone, and I need to be close in case something comes through on the band. Most nights it's static, but every now and then there's a voice. Short, desperate bursts. Sometimes they're too faint to make out. Sometimes I hear enough to know that someone's out there, but not enough to tell where. And once in a while, it's just screaming. I still don't know how much of the city is even left. The infected don't light fires, but people do, usually as a last stand, or to burn a building they can't clear. You see the plumes rising in the distance, slow and thick, hanging over whole blocks. During the day, you can count them from the roof. At night, you just see the glow. The more I watch, the more I notice there are fewer fires than there were last month. That might sound like a good thing, but it's not. Fires mean people. Fewer fires mean fewer people left to light them. The last person I spoke to face-to-face was 2 weeks ago. A guy named Raymond. He came to the station door with his hands up, looking like he'd been sleeping in alleys for days. He had a backpack and a half-empty bottle of water, and a bite mark on his shoulder that he swore was from a dog. I almost let him in. I wanted to, but I've seen too many people swear they're fine right before they start shaking and screaming. I gave him a can of soup and told him to head for the river. There's an old boathouse down there that can be locked from the inside. I don't know if he made it. I keep replaying those moments in my head. The part of me that still wants to be human hates myself for not letting him in. But the part of me that's alive right now knows I probably saved my own life. That's the thing about these last 3 months. Every decision feels like a coin flip between survival and losing what's left of your soul. Dr. Mitchell says the military's fallback plan is to pull everyone they can into green zones and let the rest of the country burn. He doesn't know how many zones there are. The rumor is maybe half a dozen in the lower 48, all in places that were already remote and defendable before this started. That's not enough for millions of people. It's barely enough for thousands. The zombies, yeah, I'm saying it, aren't rotting like they should. They don't drop after a few weeks like in the movies. The early ones we saw in March are still out there, just leaner, meaner, and faster. Mitchell thinks the virus is keeping them alive by recycling their own tissue, breaking it down and rebuilding it in some kind of horrific loop. That's why they look like walking anatomy charts. Skin pulled tight over hard muscle, eyes sunk deep, lips torn back from teeth. They don't need to breathe much, don't need water. All they need is meat. If you're moving around out there, the rules haven't changed. Quiet is your best weapon. Avoid main roads, avoid open spaces, and if you hear them before you see them, you've got maybe 10 seconds to figure out your next move. I've been testing a trick that works sometimes, throwing something noisy a good distance away before they spot you. They'll swarm the sound, but it's a gamble. If they see you first, they don't care about noise, they care about you. Sometimes I wonder what's happening in the rest of the world. The last foreign broadcast I picked up was from Dublin, an AM signal so faint I could barely hold it for more than a minute at a time. They were talking about evacuations to the west coast of Ireland, like the east was already gone. After that, nothing but static. I try not to think too far ahead. Out here, the future's not days or weeks. It's the next hour, the next time you have to step outside and hope the street's clear. But when the generator's humming and I've got a few minutes to sit in the dark, I can't help but wonder if there's going to be a point where the living just fade out entirely. No more voices on the radio. No more fires in the night. Just them, walking forever through the ruins. 88 days in, and I'm still talking to the air. If you can hear me, if you're anywhere close to Nashville, find high ground, keep your exits clear, and stay quiet. I'll be here as long as the fuel lasts, and when it runs out, well, I'll figure that out when it comes. The fuel gauge on the generator is down another quarter. That means I've got maybe 2 more nights at this output before I have to risk going out again. The thought of stepping into the streets now makes my chest tighten. Nashville isn't just dangerous. It feels different, like the whole place is holding its breath, waiting. Even the infected seem less random lately. They don't just charge when they hear a sound anymore. They hang back sometimes, staying just out of sight, letting you know they're there without committing. I've seen one stand in the middle of the street for 20 minutes straight, swaying just enough to tell me it was alive, or whatever counts as alive for them. Mitchell says it could mean the virus is organizing, not thinking like a person, but adapting, shifting how it uses its hosts. I'm not sure I believe that entirely, but I do know that when they're not moving, they're listening. You can feel it, like the weight of their attention is pressing through walls. I've been running the radio scan every hour. Most of the bands are dead. Once in a while I'll catch a burst, someone yelling coordinates, Someone screaming for help. Once even a song. A real song. It was a guitar, strummed slow and shaky, with a voice that kept cracking. It only lasted 30 seconds before cutting off. I think about that sometimes, how someone out there had the time to play music in the middle of all this. Either they were safe, or they were saying goodbye. Supplies are low. Food's the hardest part. You can only eat so many canned beans before you start wishing for something you can't have. Bread, eggs, a piece of fruit. I've been stretching meals with stale crackers, powdered milk, and whatever's in the emergency rations left behind by the station crew. I've got water, enough for now. There's a rain barrel on the roof, and the filter system still works. But winter's coming. When the rain slows, I don't know how I'm going to keep it up. Sometimes I hear movement upstairs. Could be rats, could be them. The infected don't make a lot of noise unless they're chasing something, but I've heard the scrape of shoes on tile above me, slow and dragging. I stay still when that happens, hand on the gun, breathing through my mouth so I don't hear my own heartbeat in my ears. If they're up there, they haven't found the stairs to the basement yet, or maybe they're waiting. I used to go on air thinking about an audience, picturing people in cars, kitchens, offices. Now I picture someone sitting in a dark room with the curtains drawn, holding a little battery-powered radio close to their ear. I picture them nodding when I say something they already know. I picture them maybe taking comfort that someone else is still out here, still breathing, still talking. Yesterday, just before sunset, I climbed up to the roof. Not for long, never for long, but I needed to see the horizon. There was smoke to the south, a lot of it, the kind that doesn't drift much because it's too thick. I could see black shapes moving in it, darting between buildings. And then something new. Flashes of light, like signal mirrors. I don't know if it was survivors trying to get attention or something else entirely. I didn't signal back. Not yet. The river's been quieter. Early on, I'd hear gunfire from down near the banks, people defending their spots or trying to cross. Now it's silent most nights. Either they've all moved on, or they didn't make it. There's a bridge north of here that used to be a choke point for evac convoys. Mitchell says it's probably clogged with cars and bodies now. He thinks that's where the infected are nesting in the day. 89 days is coming, and I'm starting to realize this isn't the middle of the outbreak. It's still the beginning. The cities won't hold. The green zones, if they even exist, are too far for most people to reach. And every day, there are fewer of us and more of them. If you're listening, I need you to know something. It's not hopeless. Not yet. But survival isn't going to look like it used to. You can't just wait this out. You have to be moving, hiding, thinking 3 steps ahead. And you have to accept that there's no one coming for you. If you're going to make it, it'll be because you kept yourself alive. I'll be here until the generators dry. After that, I'll take the radio and the battery packs and see if I can keep broadcasting on the move. This is Paul Sanders, WZED 94.5, Day 88 in Nashville. Stay low, stay quiet, stay alive. I didn't want to go out tonight, but the fuel gauge hit the red, and I knew if I didn't make a move now, the generator would die before dawn. That's the kind of death that doesn't happen all at once. You just sit in the dark, wondering if you should use the last of your flashlight batteries or save them. And eventually you start thinking, maybe you're better off letting the quiet swallow you. I'm not there yet. So I took the pack, the empty fuel cans, and the revolver, and I climbed the stairs to the street. The air outside was cold and sharp, the kind that bites your lungs if you breathe too fast. The street lamps have all been dead for weeks, so the only light came from a thin slice of moon and the broken glow of a fire a few blocks away. It was too far to hear, but I could smell it. Burned wood, melted plastic, and something else underneath. Something sweeter. I kept to the alleys, moving slow, listening. Every few minutes I'd stop, crouch behind a dumpster or a wall, and just wait. You can feel when the city isn't empty. It's not a sound, it's a pressure, like the weight of a gaze you can't find. Twice I thought I saw movement ahead, but nothing came of it. The old Texaco station by the interstate was my goal. It's been stripped bare a dozen times over, but the pumps still have fuel if you know how to siphon it. The trick is doing it fast enough before the noise draws company. I got lucky. The padlock was already broken, and there was a half-full plastic drum in the back room. I filled the cans, keeping my ears open for the sound I've learned to dread. Feet slapping pavement too fast to be human. I was almost done when I heard it. Not running, not charging, just a slow, steady shuffle on the far side of the building. My gut told me it wasn't alone. I killed the flashlight, crouched low, and waited. That's when I saw the first one. A woman in torn scrubs, her head tilting side to side like she was scanning the air. And behind her, 3 more, spaced out in a loose arc. They weren't wandering. They weren't hunting like usual. They were positioning, blocking the exits without coming closer. It was quiet, too quiet for them to be in their usual frenzy. I could feel my throat drying out as I realized I'd have to push past them to get back to the alleys. I took the long way, through the garage, out a side window into the weeds. I heard one of them turn its head, slow, deliberate, like it knew exactly where I was but didn't need to rush. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see if they were following. Back at the station, with the fuel in the generator and the door barred again, I can't stop replaying what I saw. It wasn't random. They were thinking, or something was thinking for them. And that's worse than anything I'd let myself imagine. Mitchell says, this is what happens when an outbreak goes on too long without burning out. Predators get smarter. They stop wasting energy. They adapt. I don't know if I can handle the idea that they're learning strategy, because that means they're not just an accident of biology anymore. They're a system. If you're listening, and you're anywhere near the city, avoid the open streets. Avoid gas stations, corner stores, anything they know humans need. They're not just waiting there by chance. Day 88, and it feels like we've crossed a line we can't go back from. I'll keep the light on here as long as the diesel lasts, but the dark is moving closer every night. The air in here feels heavier tonight. Might just be me, or maybe it's the weather moving in, low clouds pressing down on the city like a lid on a pot. The kind of sky that eats sound, makes even the close things feel far away. I topped off the generator an hour ago, but the hum of it doesn't seem to cut through the quiet the way it usually does. The walls feel closer than they should. I've been running the radio sweep every 15 minutes, and something's been coming through that I can't shake. It's not local. I can tell by the faint delay and the way the static carries between words. But it's clear enough to make out pieces. A man's voice, steady, calm, too calm. He keeps repeating the same thing. Safe zone established in Chattanooga. Coordinates are... And then there's this pause, like he's reading them off a piece of paper. Always the same numbers, always followed by the same phrase. Medical staff on site. Armed escort available. Then it loops. It sounds good. Too good. If it were real, that broadcast would be moving, evolving, reacting to what's happening. But this one doesn't change. No updates, no urgency. Just the same message, on the same frequency, every half hour. Mitchell thinks it could be a lure. Says he's heard of the infected mimicking sounds to draw people out. Groans, cries, even voices. If that's true, then hijacking a radio frequency isn't much of a leap. All they'd need is a transmitter, and there's no shortage of those in abandoned newsrooms and stations. The idea of them learning to use our own tools against us is worse than any nightmare I've had since March. I tried responding, kept it short, asked for verification, asked for a code phrase. Nothing. Just the same loop as if I'd never spoken. I'm not calling it safe, and I'm not telling anyone to go there. If you're hearing this and you've picked up that Chattanooga broadcast, treat it like a trap until proven otherwise. The streets outside are emptier than usual. That's not comforting. It means they're somewhere else. Concentrated. I don't know if that's better or worse than having them spread thin. A few hours ago, I heard a burst of gunfire to the west, maybe near the rail yard. It wasn't the random panicked kind either. It was measured, controlled. That means someone out there's still organized enough to fight and disciplined enough not to waste ammo. I'd go looking for them if it weren't suicide. Out there, in the open, you're either predator or prey, and I know which one I am. The station keeps me alive because it's solid, concrete, with a few narrow entry points. But it's also a tomb if I ever get surrounded. The fuel should last 4 more nights now. That's 4 nights of a voice on the air in Nashville. 4 more nights for anyone out there to hear me and know they're not the last one. After that, I'll have to decide. Burn the last of my reserves here and hope for a miracle. Or pack what I can carry and take my chances moving south. Day 88 feels like a number that should mean something, but it's just another day in a line of days that stopped feeling separate a long time ago. All I know is the pattern's changing. They're not just reacting anymore. They're setting the terms. If you hear a voice promising safety, remember, it doesn't take much to sound human over the radio. It happened just after noon today. I don't usually go topside in daylight unless I have to, but the sky was heavy with cloud cover and the streets were still. I'd been picking up that same Chattanooga loop for 2 days now, and part of me needed to see if anyone was actually moving toward it. Call it curiosity, call it stupidity. From the roof, I could see down to the intersection where Jefferson meets 12th. There's an old hardware store there, windows busted out, front sign half hanging. That's where I spotted them. 3 people, moving quick but cautious, packs on their backs, rifles slung. They were heading west, toward the interstate. Too clean, too fresh-looking to have been out in the open long. Then I noticed the shapes in the alleyways. Still at first. Too still. Then one shifted, just enough to catch the light on its skin. There were more of them than I could count without binoculars. At least a dozen, maybe more, positioned in a wide arc ahead of those 3. They weren't moving to intercept. They were just waiting, letting the survivors walk right into it. I wanted to shout, but the distance was too far, and sound carries the wrong way in this city now. I could only watch as the 3 hit the intersection. The moment they stepped into the open, the infected broke formation. Not a random rush, more like a closing net. They came in from the sides first, cutting off the alleys, forcing them forward. The ones in front didn't move until the survivors were close enough that retreat wasn't an option. It was over in less than a minute. I didn't see the end. I didn't need to. The screaming stopped too fast. That wasn't instinct. That was a plan. They'd set the ambush right where anyone following that broadcast's coordinates would pass through. They knew the route, knew how people would move, and they'd waited. I climbed back down, locked the roof hatch, and sat on the floor for a long time, just breathing slow and steady until my hands stopped shaking. I keep telling myself that watching was the right call, that going down there would have been suicide. But I also know those people had no idea they were walking into their last turn in the road. If you're listening, burn this into your memory. Any broadcast promising safe passage or a secure zone needs to be verified. Don't trust the voice. Don't trust the coordinates. Don't trust the timing. Make them prove they're human. Make them tell you something they couldn't possibly know unless they were on your side. And even then, move like you're walking through a minefield. Mitchell was right. These things are learning. And the worst part? They're patient. They can wait days in one place if they think the payoff will be worth it. I'm staying in tonight. The generator's full. The water barrel's half full. And I've got just enough food for the week. But the walls are starting to feel thin. Every night, I swear I hear them closer, like they're testing the edges of this place. Day 89 is coming, and the smart ones are out there now, watching. The voice came through just after midnight. Not the Chattanooga loop. This one was different. It started faint, just enough to make me stop mid-scan. A woman's voice, low and urgent, breaking through the static. If you can hear me, respond. We're holding at the Belmont campus. Repeat, Belmont campus. Limited space, medical staff present. Need more bodies for perimeter defense. I sat there with my hand hovering over the mic switch for a good 10 seconds. The cadence was all wrong for a trap. No scripted pause, no clean loop. But the mention of needing more bodies made my skin crawl. That's bait language. I keyed the mic anyway. Belmont Station. This is Paul Sanders, WZED Nashville. Verify your human status. Silence, then static, then her again. We have food, clean water, and light security. 33 survivors, including 2 nurses. You're welcome here. Coordinates incoming. I asked again for verification. Something personal. Something a human would respond to. Favorite food. Song they hated in high school. Anything that would prove she wasn't just spitting out a line. This time there was a longer pause. We don't have time for games, Sanders. You're either coming or you're not. That stopped me cold. I never gave her my name. I killed the transmit and leaned back in the chair, staring at the blinking light on the receiver. She kept talking for another 30 seconds, repeating the offer, pushing urgency. But every word that followed sounded colder, sharper, like it wasn't meant for me anymore, but for anyone else out there who might be listening. Mitchell thinks it's possible that some of them are keeping human captives alive, not for food, but for imitation. Keeping them close, learning how they speak, what they say. Long enough to stitch together a voice convincing enough to pull more people in. It's just a theory, but after tonight, I'm not sure it's far off. If you're within range of Belmont, stay away. I don't care if it's 100 living people behind those walls. It's not worth the gamble. If they know your name before you give it, they're not on your side. The streets are quieter than they should be tonight. No wind, no distant screams, no gunfire. It's the kind of quiet that makes you check every corner twice. And now I've got this nagging thought that maybe they're not trying to find us anymore. Maybe they've got enough to eat. Maybe they're just building something now. I'll keep the frequency open in case that voice, or whatever it was, comes back. But I won't answer. Not unless I hear something in it that sounds like a real person again. Day 89 is close enough to touch. And if this is how they're talking now, we're in deeper trouble than we thought. I told myself I wasn't going near Belmont. Told myself over and over while I packed 2 canteens, the binoculars, and a single protein bar. But by sunrise, I was already halfway there, sticking to side streets and moving fast when I had cover. Curiosity's a bad habit out here, but it's one I can't seem to shake. The campus is a good 2 miles from the station. Used to be a clean, open stretch. Brick buildings, wide lawns, a bell tower that looked postcard perfect in the fall. Now the grass is knee-high and the main quad is littered with burned furniture, rusted shopping carts, and the black outlines of old fires. I stopped a block away, behind the shell of a coffee shop, and pulled out the binoculars. From here, I could see the main entrance. 2 barricades made of chain-link fencing and parked cars. And people. At least they looked like people. They were standing too still. No shifting weight, no fidgeting. Just planted. There were 6 of them in total, spaced evenly along the fence. One was the woman from the broadcast. I could tell by the hair, tied back in the same loose knot. She was staring down the road, not blinking. Then something strange. One of the others turned, slow, toward her. No words, no hand signal. Just a turn, like they were looking for some invisible cue. The woman's head moved the tiniest bit, and the other figure went back to facing forward. I waited there for 15 minutes. In that whole time, none of them moved more than a fraction of an inch. And when a bird landed on the fence, close enough to touch, not one of them reacted. Then I saw it. From one of the side buildings, something stepped out. Not a person. Not fully. Not anymore. Skin gray, eyes wrong. It moved along the inside of the fence, passing right behind the woman from the broadcast. She didn't flinch. Didn't even seem to see it. That was enough for me. I backed away the way I'd come, careful not to make a sound. Back at the station now, I can still see that image in my head. Her standing there, silent, letting one of them walk past like it belonged there. If that's what's inside Belmont, then the broadcast isn't a warning. It's a net. If you're hearing me and you're anywhere near that campus, don't go. I don't care how hungry you are, how tired, how desperate. That place isn't for the living anymore. And if they figured out how to stand still, how to wait, how to bait us with voices we want to believe, then the game's already changed. Day 89's here, and they're not chasing us blindly anymore. They're inviting us in. It was just after sunset when I heard it, different from the usual static and loops. The voice was ragged, breaking like the person behind it was running while they talked. No preamble, no promise of safety. Just, if anyone hears this, please, they're at the door. I froze, hand still on the tuner. The voice was close, strong signal, maybe only a mile out. I could hear wind in the mic, maybe from an open window, and a hollow thud in the background every few seconds. Then a pause. A breath. It's Mitchell. They found me. If. The feed cut, hard. I sat there for a full minute before it sank in. Mitchell. Dr. Mitchell. The one person I'd been talking to since all this started. The one who'd given me most of what I know about how this thing spreads, how it changes. I thought he was still locked up safe in that church basement with his wife. Now he was a mile away and out of time. I grabbed my pack, the .38, and the small UV flashlight. The street outside felt like a different city than the one I'd crossed to reach Belmont. The air was warmer, still. My boots barely made a sound on the cracked pavement. Halfway there, I heard them. Soft, irregular shuffling, the sound of feet moving in grass. I ducked into a driveway and crouched behind an overturned trash bin. A group passed at the end of the street. 5 of them, maybe 6. They were slow, not hunting, but their heads were up, turning like they were scenting the air. One of them stopped, tilted its head toward me. I didn't breathe. Eventually, they kept moving. Mitchell's street was a narrow run of duplexes, half burned, half boarded. His place was near the middle, a front door hanging open just enough to show darkness inside. The thudding I'd heard on the radio was real. Something was hammering against the back of the house, slow and steady. I stepped inside, calling his name low. No answer. The air was stale, thick. A chair lay overturned near the kitchen. Papers scattered across the floor. Then I saw movement in the hall. Mitchell, leaning against the wall, pale and sweating, clutching his side. "Paul," he whispered, like the sound itself was costing him. He'd been bitten. The wound was high, under the ribs, torn through his shirt. They waited, he said. Didn't rush, just waited. I asked about his wife. His eyes dropped. That was all the answer I needed. The thudding at the back door got louder. He pushed a small notebook into my hand, fingers shaking. "It's all in here," he said. "Everything I figured out. What it does. How long it takes. Patterns." Then his voice changed. Low, urgent. "Go. Now." I wanted to drag him with me, but one look told me he wouldn't make it. The back door splintered. Shadows moved in the kitchen. I turned and ran, clutching the notebook, out the front door, down the street, not stopping until I saw the station's roofline over the blocks. I locked the studio door behind me and sat there with the notebook in my lap, hands still trembling. Haven't opened it yet. Haven't decided if I'm ready to read what's inside. Mitchell's gone. But whatever's in these pages, it's the last thing he thought worth dying for. Day 89, and the cost of staying human just got heavier. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. I sat at the desk with Mitchell's notebook under the glow of the emergency lamp, staring at it like it might bite me if I turned the cover. The thing is, I already knew I wasn't going to like what was inside. Mitchell didn't waste words. If he thought something was worth writing down in his final minutes, it wasn't going to be good news. The cover was just a plain spiral-bound pad smudged with dirt and something darker that I didn't want to think about. The first few pages were what you'd expect: symptom timelines, sketches of bite marks, notes on behavior. Some of it matched what he'd told me before. But the deeper I read, the more it shifted into things I hadn't heard from him at all. He'd been keeping records on what he called proximity events, times when the infected seemed to know where the living were without sound or sight. He'd charted over a dozen cases in the past month alone, people who swore they were silent, hidden, even masked with scent, and still the infected found them. He thought it might be some kind of low-frequency communication, something humans can't hear. The kicker? The range was increasing. One entry was underlined 3 times. Proximity range doubled in 18 days. If he was right, that means the infected can sense us from hundreds of yards away now. Soon, it could be miles. Further in, there were sketches. Crude, but detailed enough to see what he meant. Diagrams of the skull, with notes about bone density in the infected He'd found that their skulls were subtly reshaping over time, thickening in some areas, thinning in others, almost like they were evolving to amplify whatever sense they're using to find us. And then, near the end of the notebook, there was one page that made my stomach drop. A list of names. Mine was on it. Next to each name, he'd written locations, dates, and something he called contact probability. He'd been tracking the survivors he was in contact with, trying to figure out who was most at risk based on where the infected had been concentrating. My name had the highest mark. The last entry was just 2 words in shaky handwriting. They're circling. I closed the notebook and just sat there, trying to breathe slow and keep my hands from shaking. If he was right, and they're learning to find us without sight or sound, then hiding's going to stop working. Distance won't save us. Walls won't save us. I don't know if Mitchell saw this coming from the start, or if he realized it too late. But I do know this. His warning wasn't for him. It was for me. For all of us still left. I didn't plan to leave the station today. I thought I'd hole up, ration the food, keep the mic warm. But after reading Mitchell's last note, they're circling, I started paying more attention to the small things. And the small things are always the ones that break you. It started this morning, or what passes for morning now. The light outside was thin, gray, and the streets were empty. I went up to the roof to check the rain barrel, and there it was, a single footprint in the dust on the roof tiles. Not a boot tread, not sneakers, barefoot. The edges were sharp, fresh. No one gets up here without a ladder. And I haven't had one since I burned mine for heat on day 50. I told myself maybe it was old. Maybe I just missed it before. But when I came back down, I noticed the air felt warmer in the stairwell. Like someone had been there, just standing still. The worst part came after dark. I was sitting at the desk, headphones on, sweeping the bands, when I felt it, a vibration through the floor. Subtle, like the hum of the generator, but slower. Measured. Footsteps, not the random scuffle of rats or the wind shaking debris loose. This was weight, moving with intent. I killed the lights and waited. The footsteps stopped. The station was so quiet I could hear my own breathing in the headphones. Then, from somewhere near the front doors, a faint, irregular tapping. 3 taps. Pause. 2 taps. Pause. Then nothing. I didn't move for almost an hour. Eventually, I heard the sound fade, like it was stepping back into the night. Mitchell's notes keep rattling around in my head, about how they might be sensing us in ways we can't detect. If they're testing how close they can get without me reacting, then I've already failed. I'm sealing the lower windows tomorrow. No more trips to the roof unless I have to. If they're learning my habits, I need to change them fast. Day 89, and I'm not sure I'm alone in here anymore. I didn't sleep last night, not because I wasn't tired, but because I needed to know if it was real, if something's been slipping into the station while I'm not looking. You can't live with maybe in your head out here. Maybe gets you sloppy. Sloppy gets you dead. I broke my routine as soon as it got dark. No lamp, no mic check at the top of the hour. I sat in the corner near the generator room with the revolver in my lap, the UV flashlight in my other hand. The air back there smells like diesel and old paint, and the concrete walls make every little sound feel like it's coming from just behind you. At first, nothing. Just the low hum of the generator and the occasional tick of cooling metal. But about an hour in, I heard it. Soft, deliberate steps. coming from the front hallway, too light for boots, too steady for rats. I didn't move. The sound stopped halfway to the studio. Then a pause, long enough for me to start wondering if I'd imagined it. That's when I caught a shadow, just at the edge of the doorway. Not moving, just there, like it was waiting for me to break first. I didn't. After a few minutes, the shadow slid back out of sight. Then I heard it retreat. Same slow steps, measured, unhurried. I waited another 20 minutes before moving. When I finally went to check the front hallway, there was nothing. No footprints, no smell, no sign that anyone or anything had been there. Except for one thing. The heavy studio door I keep closed at all times was open by an inch. I never leave that door open. Not ever. I locked it, came back here, and realized something that made my stomach knot. If they can get inside without forcing anything, then locks don't mean what they used to. Mitchell's warning wasn't about being surrounded. It was about being breached. Day 89, and I'm starting to think I've already been found. I spent the last of the daylight tearing strips of metal from the gutted vending machine in the lobby, bending them until they curled and rattled when disturbed. Hung them from fishing line across the hallway leading to the studio, low enough that anything walking in would hit them. It's crude, but sound carries far in here. I'd know the second they moved. I killed the lights early and stayed in the generator room again, revolver and UV in easy reach. The air was thick, stale, and I could feel the weight of the station pressing in on me. Every few minutes, I'd strain to listen past the hum of the generator, wondering if I'd hear those slow, deliberate steps again. Around 3 a.m., it came. A faint metallic clink, almost delicate at first, then another, sharper. The line had been touched. Something was moving through the hallway, brushing past the strips. I waited for the shuffle of feet, but there was nothing. Just the sound of the metal swaying on its string, like whatever had set it off was standing perfectly still now. I held my breath and thumbed the UV light on. Its beam cut across the concrete, up the doorway, and caught nothing. I thought maybe I'd missed it. Maybe it had slipped away before I got the light up. But when I edged into the hallway, the strips were still moving, swaying like they'd been touched seconds ago. That's when I saw it. On the wall, near the floor, 4 faint smears. Finger marks. They weren't from a hand trying to grip or climb. They were dragging, sliding along the wall as something low to the ground moved past. I don't know if it's worse to think it was one of them inside, or to think it was something else entirely. I took the strips down after that. I don't want them knowing I'm testing for them. Day 90 starts in less than an hour, and I'm not sure the walls mean a damn thing anymore. It was early, just after first light, when I finally saw it. I'd been up all night again, scanning the bands, listening for that Belmont voice or anything that sounded human. The streets outside were empty, not even a stray moving in the alleys. I thought maybe whatever's been getting in had moved on. I was wrong. I caught it out of the corner of my eye near the lobby doors. Not walking, crawling, low to the ground, fast but deliberate, like it was pulling itself along more than using its legs. The skin was stretched so tight over its frame that the bones beneath looked ready to punch through. Its head moved in these tiny jerks, like it was triangulating something I couldn't hear. It stopped halfway across the lobby. Just stopped. The way it turned its head toward me felt wrong. Not like spotting prey, more like finding something it already knew was there. That's when I saw its hands. The fingers were longer than they should have been, bending in ways that made my stomach knot. And the tips, they weren't claws, but the nails were thick, flat, and splayed like the edge of a shovel. Perfect for prying. Perfect for sliding into gaps. It didn't lunge, didn't growl. It just stayed there, head tilted, until the generator kicked in and the hum filled the room. At that sound, it slid back toward the doors, fast enough that I didn't bother trying to follow. I waited until it was gone to check the entrance. The locks were still set. The chains were still tight. No damage. Which means it got in and out, without forcing anything. Mitchell's notes keep flashing in my head, the part about the virus changing them over time. If this is what 90 days in looks like, then we're not dealing with one kind of infected anymore. They're adapting into roles. Hunters, breakers, whatever that thing was. I'm not sure which scares me more, that it found a way in, or that it chose to leave. Day 90, and the station isn't just mine anymore. I spent most of the day tearing the station apart. Not for supplies, not for fuel, just to see where it's been. Started in the lobby. I pulled the mats up, checked every corner, every scrap of carpet. That's where I found the first sign. Little streaks of dust disturbed along the baseboards, thin lines where something's been moving low and tight to the wall, too smooth to be from rats, too deliberate to be wind. The hallway to the back offices was worse. On the far wall, under the faded station logo, there were faint smudges, almost like fingerprints. I pressed my hand to them. They were colder than the wall around them. I followed them into the records room. That door has been closed for weeks, but the dust on the floor had been pushed inward, not out, like the door had been pulled shut from the inside after something went in. I stood there a long time, hand on the handle, listening. Nothing. When I opened it, the air that came out smelled faintly metallic, like rust, or blood left too long in the heat. Inside, the filing cabinets had been dragged away from the wall, not knocked over, not tipped, moved. Behind one of them, the plaster was cracked open, just enough to show a gap big enough for something small and flexible to squeeze through. I don't know if it's been using that as an entry point, but it's big enough to explain how it's bypassing the doors. I checked the generator room next. There, right by the vent near the floor, I found another set of those long, flat nail marks. 3 deep grooves, as if it had rested its hand there before moving on. This isn't new. It's been coming and going for days, maybe weeks. The thought that I've been sitting here at the mic, talking into the dark, while something's been crawling through the walls a few feet away, it's enough to make you feel like you're already dead. Mitchell's words keep replaying. They're circling. Only now I think he meant something else. Not circling outside. Circling inside. Day 90, and I'm starting to think I've been sharing this place longer than I've been living in it. I didn't wait for nightfall this time. The moment I found that wall gap in the vent, I started working on sealing them. I dragged one of the old steel filing cabinets into the records room, wedged it flush against the crack in the plaster, and stacked boxes on top until it was too heavy for me to move alone. It's not perfect, but whatever's been squeezing through there will have a harder time now. The vent in the generator room was trickier. The metal cover was already loose on one side. 2 screws missing, like they'd been worked out over time. I don't like thinking about how that happened. I found a rusted grill from an old space heater in storage, bent it flat with a hammer and bolted it over the vent. It rattles if you touch it, but it's solid enough to slow something down. By the time I was done, the light outside was dimming. That's when I noticed something I didn't want to see. Prints on the concrete floor by the generator. Not full footprints, just the marks of those long, flat nails, dragging lightly as they moved. And here's the part that's been sitting in my gut like a stone all evening. They weren't pointing toward the vent. They were pointing away from it, which means whatever's been coming in here was already inside when I sealed it off. I keep telling myself maybe it left another way before I started working. But the quiet in the station tonight doesn't feel empty. It feels like it's listening. The lights in here throw long shadows across the walls. I keep catching myself staring at the dark corners, waiting for something to move. I don't know if I'm more afraid of seeing it again, or of not seeing it at all. Day 90, and I might have just locked myself in with it. I woke up to the sound of something scraping in the records room. Not loud, more like the faint pull of cloth over rough concrete, but steady. I stayed on the floor for a good minute, listening, trying to figure out if it was inside my head or in the walls. It wasn't in my head. I grabbed the revolver and the UV light, moved slow toward the hallway. The air was different, heavier, like dust had been stirred up. I could smell that same faint metallic tang from before. The records room door was open. I know I closed it last night. I flicked the UV light on and swept the beam across the floor. The first thing I saw was dust trails, multiple lines, all low to the ground, weaving toward the back wall. Then my stomach dropped. There weren't just one or two. There were at least 5 separate tracks, crisscrossing each other, all fresh. I turned the light toward the ceiling, and that's when I saw them. Faint smears near the top corners, like something had braced itself there, holding still. Not dust, not paint. Something oily, streaked where fingers had dragged down the wall. The scraping sound stopped. I backed into the hallway and shut the door, wedging a chair under the handle. It won't stop anything determined, but it's something. If there were 5, then whatever's been crawling in here hasn't been alone for a long time. I've been sharing this place with more than one, and if they're smart enough to keep quiet while I'm moving around, then they've been learning me the whole time. I can't stay here much longer. The station's got good walls, but walls don't mean much if you've already been breached. Day 90, and this isn't my shelter anymore. It's their hunting ground. I started packing before the sun was up. Didn't matter that I hadn't slept. Didn't matter that my hands were still shaking from what I saw last night. Staying here was suicide. I kept it light. 2 canteens, the revolver, spare ammo, the UV, Mitchell's notebook, and whatever food I could stuff in the side pouch. No broadcast equipment, no extra comforts, just what I could run with. The plan was simple. Move before dawn, while it's still dark enough to hide, but before they're fully active. Slip through the alleys to the old rail line, then follow it south out of the city. I made it as far as the lobby doors before I knew they'd been waiting for this. The air outside wasn't still. It was thick, humming with the kind of quiet you only hear when you're not really alone. Out in the street, maybe 30 feet from the door, something shifted in the shadows between 2 burned-out cars. Then another shape, low to the ground, hugging the curb, and another, further down. I froze. My brain was already putting it together. They'd been inside with me, yes, but they'd also been outside too. Watching. waiting for the one moment I'd try to leave. One of them moved into the light. Not the crawler from before. This one was taller, upright, but its head was low, shoulders forward. Its arms hung too long, fingers almost brushing the ground. I could see the skin around its mouth pulled tight, teeth bared, not in a snarl, but in something closer to anticipation. Behind it, another shifted, mirroring the same stance. I backed away from the door, slow, careful not to draw their charge. They didn't follow, didn't even step forward, just watched me retreat. I locked the doors and sat on the floor with my back to them, listening for movement. None came. They know I want to leave, and now they know they can wait me out. Day 90, and I'm trapped. Not because the doors won't open, but because they've made the whole street a cage. I waited until after midnight. The streets had been quiet for hours. No shifting in the shadows, no scrape of nails on pavement. I told myself that maybe they'd given up. Maybe they'd moved on. But I knew better. The roof was my only option. If I could get across to the next building and drop into the alley behind it, I could work my way to the rail line without crossing the street in front of the station. I kept the pack light, slung it across my shoulder, and climbed the narrow maintenance ladder to the hatch. The air outside was cool, sharp with the smell of rain that never came. The city spread out in dim shapes, blocks of dark against a darker sky. I took one slow step onto the roof, keeping low, eyes scanning for movement. That's when I saw it. 2 rooftops over, crouched low, a silhouette against the faint glow of the clouds. It didn't move, but I could feel it watching me. I eased forward, telling myself it might just be debris, a trick of the light. Then, another shape shifted on the building to my left, and another, lower down on the fire escape of the structure directly across from me. They'd thought this through. They hadn't just blocked the street. They'd ringed me in vertically. I backed toward the hatch, slow and steady, trying not to trip over the gravel and warped tar. That's when I heard it. Soft, deliberate tapping on the roof to my right. I turned just enough to catch a figure rising from the shadows near the HVAC unit, its limbs too long, its head cocked at an unnatural angle. I didn't wait. I dropped through the hatch, slammed it shut, and dragged the filing cabinet over it. Now I'm sitting here with the generator humming in the next room, my pack still on my shoulder, and the knowledge that every exit, ground or roof, is accounted for. They're not just waiting for me to leave anymore. They're making sure that when I do, it's on their terms. Day 90, and the city isn't just outside the door. It's on the walls, on the roofs, in the air. I've been staring at the floor plan pinned on the wall of the records room for most of the day. It's an old fire safety map from before the station even went digital, but it shows something I'd half forgotten. Service tunnels. Narrow maintenance corridors that run under the block, connecting to the old storm drains, and, if the lines are still intact, out toward the river. It's the only route left that isn't under their watch, which also means it's the one place I know they use during daylight. I've seen them disappear into sewer grates at dawn, and I've heard them moving underfoot in the quiet hours before sunset. Mitchell's notes have a section on their daylight patterns. Most hunker down in deep shade or enclosed spaces, conserving energy. But some, he called them burrowers, actively choose underground. Safer, cooler, hidden. If I go down there, I'll be walking into their den. I pulled the vent cover off the access point in the generator room. The air that came up was damp and stale, carrying the faint smell of wet concrete and something sour. The ladder's rusted but solid. The shaft drops maybe 12 feet before leveling into the tunnel. I've packed for it twice already today. Canteens, notebook, revolver, UV light, the short crowbar I keep by the door. Then I unpacked both times, telling myself I'd wait another day. But every time I hear them shifting outside, every time I catch a shadow on the roofline, I know waiting is just giving them more time to tighten the net. If I go, it'll have to be at first light, when the topside streets are dead and the burrowers are still settling. My hope is they'll be deep in their nests by then. My fear is that they'll hear me the second my boots hit the tunnel floor. The walls in here feel thinner tonight. The quiet isn't empty. It's charged, like the space between lightning and thunder. Day 90, and the only way out is down, straight into where they sleep. I didn't wait for the sun to come up. Couldn't. The hours before dawn are colder, quieter, and that's the only advantage I've got left. The generator's off. The station's dark. I left everything I couldn't carry sitting in the studio. Old tapes, spare clothes, even the last of the canned food. No sense slowing myself down. The ladder down to the service tunnel groaned under my weight. Each rung felt slick, not wet exactly, but coated in that fine underground grime that clings to your skin. By the time my boots hit the concrete floor, the air had changed, damp, metallic, with an undertone of rot that hit the back of my throat. The tunnel's narrow, barely wide enough for me to move without scraping my pack against the wall. My light cut a thin cone ahead of me, catching jagged outlines of old pipes and cables that look ready to crumble at a touch. Water dripped somewhere off to my left, steady enough that I could count the seconds between drops. I'd told myself I'd move slow, listen first, step second. But down here, sound bends. My own breathing felt too loud, echoing back at me in short, shallow bursts. 2 turns in, I found the first sign that I wasn't alone. The dust on the tunnel floor wasn't uniform anymore. It had been swept in irregular arcs, like something had been dragging itself along the walls. The marks were fresh, the edges sharp, and every so often, one of those long, flat nail impressions was pressed deep into the grime. I stopped at an intersection where 3 tunnels met. The air shifted there, colder from one direction, warmer from another. That warmth carried a smell I knew instantly. Not death, not rot. Breath. Stale, recycled breath. I killed the light and stood in the dark for what felt like 10 minutes, straining to hear. At first, there was nothing but the drip of water. Then, faint and low, came a sound I'd heard in the station at night. A slow scrape, pause, scrape. They were awake. I turned toward the colder tunnel, moving slow, careful not to splash through the thin film of water running along the floor. Every step felt like a countdown I couldn't stop. Day 90, and I'm deeper than I've ever been. If they're sleeping light. If they're hunting, I'm already in their teeth. The cold tunnel narrowed after about 50 yards, the ceiling dipping low enough that I had to hunch. The air sharpened as I went, the smell of rot fading into something dry, dusty, like old paper or wood left too long in a cellar. Then my light hit it, an archway of rusted metal set into the tunnel wall. Someone had welded steel plates into the concrete here, bolting a makeshift doorframe into place. The door itself was gone, leaning half-rotted against the wall a few feet away. Inside was a space bigger than I expected, high enough to stand, maybe 20 feet across, with shelves made from scavenged lumber nailed into the walls. It was an outpost. The shelves were lined with what was left of supplies, rusted cans, water bottles clouded with algae, a stack of radios with their guts hanging out. In the center of the room, a folding table lay on its side, one leg twisted like it had been stepped on. And the sleeping bags, 4 of them, laid out in a row along the far wall. 3 still had bodies in them. What was left of the people was dry, almost mummified, their skin shrunken tight over bone. No blood, no signs of a fight, just emptied. On the wall above their heads, someone had scrawled a message in black marker. The words were faded, but I could still make them out. They wait for you to sleep. I don't know why, but I whispered it out loud. It didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like a fact, something the writer had realized too late. I moved to the far end of the room, stepping around the bodies, and found a pile of broken radios in the corner. Some were burnt, some just smashed. Maybe they'd been trying to keep quiet, stop the signal from giving them away. The longer I stood there, the more the cold in the air felt unnatural. Not like weather, but like the absence of breath, the absence of life. I didn't stay long. Places like this, they're loud in ways you can't hear. You can feel the echo of whatever happened there pressing in. I'm moving deeper into the cold tunnel now. Day 90, and the only safe place I've found down here was already a tomb. The tunnel sloped down, just enough that my boots started to slip on the slick patches. The air got colder still, and the light from my torch seemed to dull against the damp walls. That smell of stale breath came back, fainter than before, but steady. I started seeing more of those drag marks, low along the walls, running parallel, like 2 or 3 things had been moving side by side. Every now and then, there'd be a deeper groove, a place where something had braced or shifted its weight. Then, the walls widened, not into another room, not exactly, but into a stretch where the concrete gave way to something older, brick, worn and crumbling in places. My light caught the glint of metal ahead, and I slowed. It wasn't just scrap. The floor ahead was littered with pieces of pipe, wire, bent rebar, lengths of chain, all stacked in small piles along the sides of the tunnel, like something, had been collecting it. A few of the piles were sorted by size, the ends neatly aligned. Not random scavenging. Purpose. The deeper I went, the more I saw. Sections of the tunnel had fresh boards nailed across the ceiling, reinforcing it. Other parts had been cleared entirely, debris pushed back into tidy heaps. And then, in the largest open space yet, I found the worst part. A framework of metal, bolted together from scavenged beams and fence panels, rising from the floor in a half-complete ring. Inside it, coils of wire and tubing ran in a tangle toward the center, where a battered steel drum sat with its lid clamped shut. I didn't need to open it to know what was inside. The smell of iron and rot was leaking from the seams. They're not just nesting down here, they're building. The question I can't get out of my head is why. Are they storing food for later? Stockpiling for when the streets run empty? Or is this something else? Something bigger? I backed out slow, careful not to kick anything over. I don't know if they were nearby, but the cold in the air had shifted. Less still, more like it was moving around me. Day 90, and I think I just walked into their workshop.